Hello and welcome to the EDFL Web TV podcast. No on-camera segment this week, we do apologise, but myself, Teo Pellizzeri and Adem Saricaoglu will be joining you from the Sporting Globe in Moonee Ponds very soon. A hectic week with the start of finals in 2 of the 3 EDFL divisions. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the podcast format, on the YouTube page where you're watching this, if you go down to where it says Show More, click that, and all the time codes for the different divisions and the different games and each little conversation point will be there. So you might see a video that's almost an hour long, but you can actually jump to specific games and specific discussions and segments as part of this production. So make sure you check that out if you want to just tune in and listen to your particular game, or you want to hear the weekend preview and not the summary of the round just gone. Adem Saricaoglu is on the line. Adem, great to have you back, and hopefully I will be in a better state next week and I can rejoin you back at the Sporting Globe at 690 Mount Alexander Road in Moonee Ponds.
Yeah, working from home today, Teo, but that's okay. It's obviously plenty to discuss today. Div 1 and Div 2, the home-away season is wrapped up, and we know he's been relegated from out of Div 1. We know he's playing finals as well in those 2 divisions, but also a big final week coming up in Premier. So even though we're not at the Sporting Globe today, Teo, it's okay. We'll get stuck into having a chat about all 3 divisions and what is going to be a big, big weekend coming up.
We will, and we'll keep it fairly linear, so if you want to jump to discussion of relegation in Essendon Forward Division 1 or some of the other major talking points of the week from Division 2 with the top 4 being locked in, as I mentioned off the top, just click Show More and go to the time codes and you'll be able to go to those discussions. But we start with Strathmore Community Bank Premier Division because one team has secured safety for next season in the division. 3 are still vulnerable to the drop, and even though Pascoe Vale were well short of Avondale Heights, 18 goals to 8 at the weekend, they are now in a position where mathematically they are locked into Strathmore Community Bank Premier Division next year. And they were breathing a big sigh of relief, Adem, because Essendon Doutta Stars were just 2 points away against Airport West from keeping them in the mix to still go down. So good news for Pascoe Vale. They haven't had the most convincing season. They've got the worst attack in terms of points for and the lowest percentage in the league, but they will be loading up and through the off-season preparing for another Premier campaign.
Yeah, just the 4 wins this year for Pascoe Vale, and 1,271 points for this year, and that's well down on everyone else. Only a little bit ahead of Essendon Doutta Stars, but well down on everyone else. So attacking potency perhaps will be the focus for Paco going into 2015, and it showed on Saturday, Teo, because they were scoreless up to quarter time and had given away 7-7 the other way to Avondale Heights.
Certainly was a worrying scoreline when it came through at quarter time, and you just assume that Keilor and Rose are having a party when you see a scoreline like that, so no surprises that they kicked 6 each, and now one's on 74, the other's on 72, and they'll decide who wins the goal kicking in the final round of the season. But before we talk about Avondale, let's talk about Pascoe Vale. Their season ends with a genuine dead rubber against Airport West, another team that can't make finals and can't be relegated. So how do we assess what they've done? You look at the weekend, they had Sherman in the best again. You wonder what could have been had he played the whole year. Michael Sikora, 200-centimetre plus ruckman. He'll be incredibly hard to keep hold of, I'm sure, because they're in such short supply around local footy that anyone who stands at his stature is going to command a pretty high price. And, of course, Patrick Vez-Premi, who has been a bit of a revelation week to week and is probably the reason they're avoiding relegation, because you think back to that Essendon Doutta Stars game they won the first time around. He was critical in winning that match, and he's more or less paid for himself, because you could very easily say that he's the reason that they're coming back to Premier Division next season.
Yeah, certainly. Like I said, only the 4 wins this year, but one of those, Teo, was against Aberfeldie back in round 13. So the signs are certainly there that, if they can just build a nucleus and add to that a little bit over the summer, then maybe they'll be able to be more competitive next year. But as we know, Premier Division is very, very tough, and They'll probably be a bit lucky this year that a couple other clubs were down, obviously. We expected the Northern Saints to struggle, but Doutta certainly didn't deliver, and Maribyrnong Park also below their usual standards. So perhaps a touch lucky Pascoe Vale that they will stay up, because for mine, there is a fair bit of work to do to that list. But they've got the whole summer to try and get that right, come back in 2015. So about par this year to 4 wins, I reckon, for Pascoe Vale in the end.
Let's look at Avondale Heights, the winning team. They did kick 18-23, which suggests that it could have been considerably more as far as the margin goes. They kicked 3 goals, 9 in the third quarter. Rose and Keilor we've touched on, but looking down the list, Josh Grabowski didn't kick a goal and wasn't in the best. Some of their players that are more out there to do a job and play a role, Paul Harris, Dean Bartrop, also James Taberner, who really impressed us in the drawn game against Strathmore. Good to see those guys forcing their way into the best, but crucially, Matt Cravino didn't play. So Sadi Ghazi has one more game to try and get Cravino right, and I suspect that he won't want to throw him in the deep end of a major final. So one can only assume that if he's ready to go with that broken arm, he'll be getting some limited minutes and just getting a feel for the pace of the game this weekend when Avondale Heights take on the Keilor team that we'll get to in a moment.
Yeah, he's been out for a while now, Cravino, but they do have that week coming up. Obviously locked into top 2, Avondale Heights, so they're not really playing for a whole lot this weekend against Keilor. So whether you bring him in for a quarter or two, they can afford to do that, and that obviously helps their cause. But it seems like no Matty Cravino, no problems on the weekend at least for Avondale Heights, because they were simply dominant against Pascoe Vale, like you said. Rose and Keilor did have another day out. They split 12 goals between them quite evenly in the end, and 6 each. So really, really good performance. And the Avondale Heights that we have come to expect really showed on Saturday at Canning Reserve.
Now let's stay with the top 4 race for the moment, because the relegation battle has so many scenarios that it's probably best we talk about it hand in hand with predicting the upcoming weekend of games. Greenvale's comfortable win against Keilor. You can watch this at EDFL.tv. I suspect a number of the opposition coaches will be watching it because they'll want to do some homework on whichever one of these two teams makes the finals. No goals kicked in the final quarter. Keilor kicked just 1 behind after half-time. And you can actually see the post-match interviews and hear the post-match interviews on the EDFL YouTube channel. The Sporting Globe player of the day was Dean Smith. He got the $40 voucher. There's a video interview with him. And we also caught up with Stephen Paxman, the stand-in Greenvale coach, and Jared Dixon, the assistant coach of Keilor. It wasn't really a noteworthy game other than the final result. Adam, how impressive were Greenvale and how unimpressive were Keilor here?
Very impressive, Tay. They look like a final side. We know they're not necessarily guaranteed to make them. They need to win this week, obviously. Maybe some other results need to go their way as well. But on Saturday, they looked really, really good, and they made Keilor look second-rate, basically. As a spectacle, this game didn't really have much at all, but it really was fascinating to just watch how Greenvale were able to dismantle Keilor, and maybe not so dismantle Keilor, but certainly restrict them and not allow them to get any movement going whatsoever. I mean, Keilor goalless in the second half completely and just never looked like getting going at any stage. So, Greenvale, they looked like the Greenvale of old, Teo. I was quite impressed with a lot of what they were doing, obviously. Pretty much a full side. There were a couple missing, obviously, and certain players like Jorgensen didn't necessarily play a full game, spent a lot of time on the bench. But, this game, Teo, it wasn't great to watch, let's be honest. But as far as analysing just where Keilor and Greenvale are at right now, it was quite fascinating, to be quite honest. And Keilor, can't see them doing any damage in the finals if they do get there, because on Saturday they were second rate.
Now let's talk about Greenvale, the victors. Their scenario for this weekend is they must beat Maribyrnong Park. The margins are relevant, and they must have Keilor lose to Avondale Heights. We'll get the tips at the end of the Premier chat when we go through the tips game by game. So I want to talk about Greenvale if they do make the finals. Ben Clifton. I said on the broadcast in the first quarter, when he already had 2 goals to his name, that he was the sort of confidence player that he'll either kick 2 or he'll kick 5+. And I was under the assumption that given he had 2 in the early stages of the first quarter, he was going to go on and have a day out. And to be honest, he did have probably, 6, 7 shots for goal. and his kicking for goal really was haywire after the first two majors of the day, which must be frustrating for him personally because he can really take a good clunk and present as a contested marking option in that forward line. And I just think that if he finds his radar and straightens up, he's the sort of guy that could kick 5 or 6 goals in a major final and basically be the difference between Greenvale advancing through the finals and potentially winning, the premiership, as opposed to going out to one of the other teams that they might end up facing in September. Jacob Thompson ended up the top scorer with 3, but Clifton really is the centrepiece of this forward line, and other than his kicking for goal, I thought he probably was the best on ground.
Yeah, it does help when you've got Jacob Thompson alongside. Jacob Thompson's obviously played a lot of Essendon VFL this year, but pretty sure the Bombers won't be playing finals in the VFL, and that'll allow Jacob Thompson to be available for any games that Greenvale do play from now on in after this weekend. So it's going to help Clifton out a lot. The forward line, Garzo kicked a goal as well. So I think, did Zumbo actually play Teo?
No, VFL at the weekend, and I'm pretty sure Paxman said they won't be getting him back next week either.
Yeah, so that obviously will be a loss, and that does mean that you'll be relying on Thompson and Clifton to get the job done, which is obviously going to be a bit of a stretch. But they didn't have to kick a lot of goals this weekend, Greenvale. Like I said, Keilor only had the 11 shots on goal, only 3 of them were goals. So they did what they had to do. 9-18, they kicked Greenvale in the end, so they certainly kicked themselves out of it. And Clifton, he will be one to watch if Greenvale do go beyond next week, because you're right, he got plenty of the ball and certainly wasted a few opportunities.
You're listening to the EDFL Web TV podcast on the EDFL YouTube channel, brought to you by the Sporting Globe at 690 Mount Alexander Road in Moonee Ponds. And so we move on to the games directly relevant to the relegation picture in Strathmore Community Bank Premier Division, and we have to go to Hanson Reserve. Agony for the Essendon Doutta Stars, the 6th game of this season that they've lost by a goal or less. I know they've had some close wins as well, but you think even if they'd broken even in the games decided by less than a kick this year, they'd be nowhere near the drop zone. And if they'd actually won more than they'd lost in the close game stakes, they might actually be pushing for finals. But they find themselves still on the bottom of the ladder, and given that they were in front at all 3 quarter breaks, when we were doing the live ladder at some of the breaks, Adam, they were actually 7th on the table, and they end up the day a point behind Airport West and in 10th on the table. Footy is a really cruel game, and I reckon the Doutta Stars must be starting to feel like this just isn't their year.
Yeah, it all comes down to this weekend as well for Essendon Doutta Stars. Massive game against the Northern Saints, but it was right there for it, and they let out all 3 changes in this game, Teo, and it was all single figures, so it stayed really close. This really was game of the round as well. Ended up being a 29-goal game in the end, but that one extra goal of 15-14, the 15 was for Airport West, so very stiff in the end were the Stars. But, a lot of these close performances and being competitive most weeks, it does show that, if Douttas can stay up, just a little bit of tweaking to the list perhaps. I did suggest that perhaps they might want to clean out, but maybe that's not necessary this year and over the next a few months in the summer, obviously, if they do stay up. I reckon just top up a little bit, maybe get a bit more experience perhaps. I know they got plenty of that last year. Then if they can just top up a few areas, then they will be okay. Essendon Doutta Stars for mine, because they're a pretty good footy club when they do get going. They just don't have enough firepower, it seems, at the moment, because Steve Polk's been forced to do a lot of the work this year up front. He's leading the goal kicking every week. Got another 4 on the weekend, but around him, where's the support in the forward line? I suppose that's the big question for the Stars. So they might just a few more match winners, perhaps, if they can get their hands on any of those, or develop some kids. We know they've got a really strong junior system, so a few of the youngsters might come up next year and be able to provide that. But you're right, it's been a very tough year for Essendon Doutta Stars and their supporters, and they expect better, obviously, in terms of win-loss. But it all comes down to Saturday, and they might still be able to survive.
We spoke to Jeff Madden, the under-16 Essendon Doutta Stars coach, on EDFL Preview. You can hear that full interview on the EDFL YouTube channel. The optimism for Essendon Doutta Stars is they've got a number of guys who were playing under-16s last year, first-year under-18s, or guys who were playing under-16s 2 seasons ago that are second-year under-18s that have been rotated through this team through the back half of the season. And even though they have 4 or 5 under 18 eligible players every week, they've been super close. So if they do find a way to avoid relegation, maybe they will be able to prune the budget a bit, trust the kids, and let them fight against relegation next year. And alternatively, if they do get relegated, they'll probably have to prune the budget, but also they might be in a position where they can go for the premiership next year without actually having to spend the amount of money that, say, Pascoe, Vale or Airport West spent in 2011 or 2012 when they won the old B-grade flag and came up. On Airport West, their season, of course, in no man's land at the moment. Just a brief word. Have our thoughts on them changed at all since last week? I did suggest that they would be motivated to win, both pride in performance, match fees, and also the fact that they may have wanted to put one over Doutta Stars as well, and also just that footballers are competitive animals. But you look at their win here, it goes to show that when the chips were down and when they were in an arm wrestle in the last quarter, that they could have the spirit to go on and win the game. Yeah,
credit to Airport West in this performance, but I think it's been a week or two now where they know they can't make finals and can't get relegated. So looking through the side, it doesn't, not too many names stand out to me as sort of new players. So they've pretty much still gone.
Just the one, I think. John Carlo Ravanello and Matthew Crawford appear to have played their first games of the season. So I'm not sure whether those are twos players topping up. You'll have to forgive my not knowing off the top of my head, but they did have a couple of first gamers in the team.
Yeah, a couple there, but the majority of the, I suppose, best side was still out there. Interested to see what they do this weekend against Pascoe Vale. That is a dead rubber. Both clubs have nothing to gain out of it other than, maybe bring some kids in, see how they're going at this level, and look to the future and look to 2015. So, yeah, look, Airport West. I don't necessarily think they're an automatic lock for finals year in year out in this division. They still have to top up a little bit and maybe, as I said last week on last week's show, go down the VFL route, see if there's any players on the fringes in the VFL at Coburg or the Northern Blues or any other, the Bombers obviously, any fringe players that might be available for the picking. Have a look at them and see how they go there, because if they want to be playing finals footy and be a perennial finalist, then they have to start bringing these blokes in. Just look at Avondale Heights, what they've been able to do this year.
Ravanello was out of the under-18s. Some of the other guys that hadn't had much exposure to senior footy, Gareth Laidler, only in his second game, he came out of the reserves as well. All right, we move on the EDFL Web TV podcast and look at Northern Saints losing to Strathmore. This match was more or less the margin we expected. At half-time, it was 5 points the difference. We all thought that Strathmore were in there fighting, much like they did the first time around at Lebanon Reserve. And then in the third quarter, Strathmore kicked 7 goals to 2. And then in the last quarter, 6 goals to 4. So they were pulling away in the second half. And even though Rocky Ferraro booted a bag of 6 for the Northern Saints, Dylan Jordan kicked 5 for Strathmore in his first senior game of the season, in a nice little boost for him coming out of the reserves. And Strathmore, they roll along and they have a seemingly meaningless match against Aberfeldie this weekend as far as the ladder goes, but we'll get to that in the tips section. What did you make of this performance here, and what does it say about both the Moors and the Northern Saints?
As far as the Saints are concerned, it's obviously all about this weekend when they go to Nipper Jordan to take on the Stars. So this, I suppose, this game served as a bit of a lead up to that. Good to see EDFL TV's own Rocky Ferraro kick 6 and certainly helped along the Northern Saints' cause, but in the end, obviously, it wasn't enough. Interesting to note that neither of the Grimers were available for Strathmore. Neither of them played. They've both been kicking all the goals, obviously, recently, but good to see that Dylan Jordan in the number 53 Guernsey comes in and kicks 5 on debut. That's a pretty good effort. And again, just shows that just how much depth that Strathmore have. And we know that there's a lot of quality in that list, but even coming through to reserves and perhaps even the 18s as well, these guys bat very, very deep, and they've got obviously a lot of VFL listed guys as well, ex-VFL listed in amongst that. So they're going along nicely at Strathmore at the moment. This weekend, it's all about, for Northern Saints, it's all about this weekend. Strathmore probably is a bit of a dead rubber. Neither club can get anything out of the Aberfeldie-Strathmore game this weekend. So, Strathmore will be looking to next week, and Avondale Heights, obviously, and the Saints, it's all about the Essendon District Stars. So this game, it probably just served as a bit of a lead in there, probably.
It certainly did, and looking at Strathmore's team, Purcell and Ray, neither of them named in the best, but they combined for 5 goals. You got Winter as the main spearhead in that forward line when the Grimers aren't there or when Matt Little isn't there. So they're sport for choice inside their attacking 50 with shorter lead-up targets, traditional small forwards, and also the big forward types. Let's go now to Aberfeldie's win against Maribyrnong Park. This was crucial not just for the result, but also percentage. And when it came through that Aberfeldie was up 71-30 at half-time, the result was pretty much beyond doubt, and Marby really, in the second half, falling away, Aberfeldie 9-3, in a result that leaves Maribyrnong Park's percentage still more or less comparable to the Northern Saints heading into the final weekend. Tom Hislop has only played the 4 games this season, but has taken the league by storm. He's kicked 16 goals now, a bag of 8 at the weekend. Our man, the Kyle Count, up to 38 goals for the year, another bag of 5, best on ground according to the Aberfeldie team sheet. So we know that as soon as he gets more than 15 possessions, he's on track for a bag of 4 goals. And if he gets up near 20 possessions, he's going to really hurt you on the scoreboard, and 5 goals reflects that. Maribyrnong Park side of the equation, Robbie Costello kicked 4 goals and was his team's best, but this was always going to be a tough task for Maribyrnong Park, and it's not really a surprise that Aberfeldie took care of business at a comfortable margin here.
Not a surprise at all. Really worrying that 6 of the 7 goals were kicked by Robbie Costello and Nathan Black, obviously 2 quality players, but who else was there? That was the big question. Medhurst obviously did not play. But just on Reimers, Teo, he's been on the receiving end of a lot of flack this season, but as you just mentioned, 38 goals. Had you have told Abbas that he'd kick 38 17 rounds in, they probably would have taken that, wouldn't they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, assuming that Aberfeldie plays him next week and doesn't rest him, and then if they go the long way, they'll have to play all 3 finals. There's a very real chance he could end up kicking 50 for the season, which for a player who's by no means a full-time forward would be an excellent return. And I guess if you're going to go out and engaging in a bidding war for some of the top ex-AFL talents out there, you want a return on your investment, and Tom Hislop and Kyle Reimers returning in spades at the weekend, and it must be nice for Mal Michael to know that he's got 2 of his match-winning players in prime form, and now they get a free hit against Strathmore this weekend to test themselves against one of the top teams, and they'll go into that first final against either Greenvale or Keilor in very good form.
Yeah, they use the opportunity to run themselves into form, and this is the time of year, obviously, when the premiers emerge, Teo. It seems to be the trend not only at this level, but even at AFL level. It's not usually always the best team of the entire season that ends up winning the flag. It's the best team in the final month or two that usually wins it. And Abbas will be hoping that they can build on this now and really take on Strathmore, full steam ahead. If they can knock them over, then all of a sudden we've got a genuine 3-horse race for the flag.
All right, now on the EDFL Web TV podcast, we are going to look ahead to the final round of the Strathmore Community Bank Premier Division season. And so we go to the match for broadcast, the Northwest FM 98.9 and Team App game of Saturday. Of course, it's not the game of the week because we've got a Sunday broadcast as well. But let's right off the top go to the match that matters as far as relegation. Essendon Doutta Stars hosting the Northern Saints. We saw the match at Mutton Reserve earlier in the season. It was a very comfortable win for Essendon Doutta Stars. Stephen Paulk was excellent in that match, and John O'Morris was our Sporting Globe player of the game, getting the voucher. Northern Saints, it was really a listless performance earlier in the season, a match which, if they had won, we almost would have been punching their ticket back to Premier Division, but it was 126-82, and I remember making the comment at the time that of the 19 goals Essendon Doutta Stars kicked that day, I reckon 15 of them would have been in the corridor and within 20 metres of goal. They just kicked a lot of easy goals that day and were more or less able to do as they pleased once they got the ball forward of centre and put the Northern Saints defence under any sort of pressure.
There was a lot of heat in that game as well, Tayo. I remember there was spot fires all over the place, and even comments that might have been shared between opponents that just wait for round 18 and we'll go at it again. So this could be a really fiery affair, and with just about everything on the line, I'm really looking forward to this game. It's going to be played with a sort of genuine finals-like intensity, albeit the winner survives and the loser probably maybe goes down. I know the Marby game sort of will dictate that as well, but I'm really looking forward to this game for that reason, Tayo, just because 10 weeks ago these two clubs were engaged in a pretty spiteful affair, I reckon.
Well, I guess we'll talk about this hand in hand with Maribyrnong Park hosting Greenvale. Of course, the situation as it stands at the moment in Premier Division is that if the Northern Saints win, or if the match is a draw, they stay up no matter what. And similarly, if Marby wins or draws, they stay up no matter what. But if Essendon Doutta Stars beats the Northern Saints and Greenvale beats Maribyrnong Park, then it all comes down to percentage. Northern right now, 78.46. Maribyrnong Park, 77.80. So it's on a knife edge. There's less than 1% separating the two teams. And for the second week in a row, it's going to be calculators at the ready, trying to work out who might get squeezed into last place. I'm tipping the Stars. I think it will come down to percentage because I'm going to tip Greenvale as well. Can you make a case for Maribyrnong Park to kick a winning score against Greenvale, or is it really all about damage limitation and hoping for a favourable result with the Northern Saints getting up against Douta's over at Nipper Jordan?
Douta's probably favourites firstly, so look, that's gonna spell some trouble for Marby Park. I really can't see Marby, based on what I saw a week ago up at Section Rotato, I can't see Marby getting the job done over Greenvale. Greenvale is simply, they were playing finals footy on Saturday, and Marby certainly haven't been doing that this year, and I don't think they're going to be able to compete too much. They could pull off a big surprise. There's been stranger things happen this season, Teo, but Marby's going to struggle. As far as this game at Nipper Jordan Oval, it's going to be our broadcast game. Unfortunately for the Stars, I'm tipping the Northern Saints, Teo. I really like how they go about it, this footy club, the Saints, and really potent. As we know, they're clearly the highest scoring team in the bottom five, only slightly behind Greenvale in the bottom six. So I don't know if Essendon Doutta Stars can match it. If Northern Saints want to engage in a shootout, which we know they're very good at, they're going to win the game, Teo. So is Essendon Doutta Stars not only the back six, of course, but their whole defensive ground-wide game, is that ready for what could be a complete onslaught by the Northern Saints?
Wow, well, okay, so you've got Douta's going down. I'm going to go in a very different direction. I think Douta's will win, and I think Greenvale, we heard it from Stephen Paxman himself, there's no love lost between Greenvale and Maribyrnong Park after the back-to-back grand finals they played in 2009 and 2010. I think Greenvale, obviously needing to win, let's not forget that that's part of the equation as well, will go for it against Maribyrnong Park. And I really do think that Marby will get relegated on percentage because I can see Douta's getting up in a close one and the Northern Saints surviving by virtue of a better percentage than Maribyrnong Park. So ultimately, neither of us have tipped the Saints to go down at the end of the day, and I'm pretty sure, looking at the EDFL website where we're currently running a poll on who the footy fan community thinks will get relegated at the time of recording this podcast, Saints 19, Marby 43, Essendon Doutta Stars 73. So Douta's 54% of the vote, Marby 31% of the vote, and the Saints 14%. So the footy community is a bit like us, Adam. They think that the Saints are going to survive.
Yeah, well, I've already got a bit better percentage than Maribyrnong Park, and the fact that the Marby have to take on the Jets, I can't really see, even if both these clubs go down, the biggest loser I still think is going to be Maribyrnong Park. So the Saints might just be safe, and they're not going to be treating this week like they are safe, but knowing in the back of their mind that destiny is in a way sort of in their hands, that might allow them to free themselves up a little bit. It might relieve a bit of the pressure, and if you get a free-flowing Northern Saints up and about, Teo, they're very hard to stop on the scoreboard. So that's why I think the Saints are safe.
Let's address Keilor versus Avondale. Can you make a case for Keilor here? The only way I can see them winning is if the weather turns, and right now it's going to be fine and in the teens, so that's not a good sign. And I think it's going to have to be a lockdown 7-6, 8-7 sort of a game, and I just can't see Avondale Heights being contained in that manner. I think the Heights will win and win well, and it will be the end of Keilor's season after dropping out of the top 4 in the very last round.
They're going to have to turn around what was a pretty shocking performance against Greenvale, and it's a really big turnaround to make against arguably the best team in the league. So Avondale Heights wins this game, and even Keilor's backline, I can't really what answer have they got for Rose and Galea if they both play?
Now, the other matches without quite as much on the line. Let's start with the genuine dead rubber, Pascoe versus Airport West. It's at Rayburn Reserve, but I think Airport West will end the season with a win. Which way are you leaning on this one?
Yeah, Airport West as well. Obviously, this game has absolutely nothing on the line.
Well, it might decide who wins the tipsters competition, but not a great deal else.
Yeah, that's going.
Or, might I add, it could decide the league medal. Let's not forget that the Reynolds medal could be on the line with a number of star players, Vez Premi, maybe Gavin Urquhart or Daniel Harris in the mix from these two teams.
Yes, it could, Teo, and some of those contenders might be just nudging to their teammates during the week. Make sure you give me the loose handball and help me rack up the stats and make sure it's near the umpire as well so that he's paying attention, I reckon. So there could be a bit of that happening. With nothing on the line, these two clubs could just go out and have a ball and they could kick 20 goals each. I mean, this could be a real exhibition of really good EDFL footy with no real pressure on the line. And
the other match, which is technically a dead rubber, but still has finals implications on the line in terms of scouting and player performance and maybe a few cards close to the chest, or maybe just the chance to get a bit of a mental advantage. Strathmore, who start the round on top of the ladder against Aberfeldie, who they can't drop to fourth because their percentage is 49 points better than that of Keilor, so it's mathematically unlikely, if not impossible. So regardless of how Aberfeldie goes, they'll finish third on the table. And Strathmore, they're going to be playing at Windy Hill in the first final, so much of a muchness. Finishing top looks nice in the history books, but that's really what they're playing for here. And as far as what Craig Clinic and Mount Michael get out of playing each other in this game, who do you think has more to gain as far as preparing for a potential preliminary final or grand final showdown between these two teams?
Look, I don't know if any of the boys up at Strathmore are superstitious, but if they care about what colour shorts they're wearing against Avondale Heights, then maybe it's important they either win or, dare I say, even lose if they prefer wearing the white shorts. That's literally all that Strathmore have to care about in this game. And Abbas have nothing to gain either. So I wouldn't be surprised. Hey, I have no inside knowledge. I don't know what the plans are for Craig Clinic and Mel Michael this week, but there could be quite a few boys rested, I reckon.
You're listening to the EDFL Web TV podcast. We're on the EDFL YouTube channel, and as we mentioned through this segment, don't forget you can see the interview with Dean Smith and hear the interviews with Stephen Paxman, Jared Dixon, and also we had the interview from EDFL Preview with Jeff Madden, the Essendon Doutta Stars under-16s coach. And so, thanks to the Sporting Globe at 690 Mount Alexander Road in Moonee Ponds, we move on to Essendon Ford Division 1, where we said goodbye to one team and the season ended for four others at the weekend with the completion of the home and away season. Let's get straight to the relegation situation because Hadfield went down. Oak Park were merciless at the weekend. I think they kicked the first three goals in about 10 or 11 minutes, and we thought, all right, well, Hadfield got the jump last week. Nothing to read into it too much. But then all of a sudden it absolutely ballooned out and it was 7-4-46 to 2 behinds at quarter time and 14-6-90 to 5-7-37 at half time. There was just no way that Craigieburn was going to get thrashed by enough to get relegated on percentage, and Hadfield in the end go down with a defeat that, it'll live in the memories of some of the players that come back for pre-season next year, but I think most of them will want to put it out of their mind as soon as possible. Oak Park, amazingly, even though they had a 6-10 record, finished the season with a percentage over 100, and Hadfield go down on percentage 63.53 compared to their fellow three-win team Craigieburn 67.99. So they only spent 2 weeks on the bottom of the table at the end of the season, but it's all about where you are at the end of round 18.
Yeah, commiserations to Hadfield, the boys down there at Martin Reserve. They were pretty good at certain times this year, and we saw them against Oak Park first time around, Teo, and they looked pretty good that day, Queen's birthday weekend. This time around, though, two pretty different sides that took the field, and yeah, Oak Park, they've finished the season quite well, actually. I really like the momentum they started to build towards the end there, and certainly plenty of promise for next year for Benny Chapman and the boys down there at Oak Park. So they've really ended their season well. 13 goal kickers, Teo, in the end. in a 25-goal performance for Oak Park, so that was just quite incredible. Hadfield, look, they got comprehensively beaten, but their kicking was disappointing. 10-17 ended up on the scoreboard, 25-11, pretty accurate Oak Park. So, that poor kicking, and you mentioned that percentage, and not all that much percentage ended up deciding relegation. It turns out in front of goal, if you kick straight, then maybe, just maybe, Hadfield is still in Division 1 next year. And that just simply highlights a pretty basic thing in footy. We get very technical these days, Teo, about analysing games and certain game styles and how you defend. But at the end of the day, you've still got to kick straight, and that really hurt the Hawks on Saturday.
Now, Hadfield, of course, avoided the league split in 2012. They were one of the clubs that was able to keep their nose above the line and stay in Division 1. Now they head down to Division 2. As we've mentioned all year, Division 1 is a league where there are no easy games and you rarely get a week off, if ever. You're always backing up in a tough contest against a good opponent, and if you're not pushing for the top 4, you're looking over your shoulder at relegation. It's safe to say Division 2 is not that sort of competition. There will be some occasions next year where Hadfield will win by 100 or even 150 plus, assuming they keep most of their list together. But I guess that's the big question. Do they keep their list together and go down as an automatic premiership contender for Division 2? Or do they suffer a bit here from a bit of outside perception, or perhaps the label of Division 2 being slapped on the club? I mean, I hope they don't. I wrote about it in The Footballer this week, that it's important that the club be judged by the people that are there and the environment that they create, rather than something as simple as the division that they play in. But unfortunately, human nature means that if a player thinks that he should be playing in Division 1 or should even be playing in Premier, Hadfield might suffer here. So how do you think 2015, we're looking at it from a bit of a distance, but how do you think 2015 will go for the Hawks?
Yeah, look, I've been saying for a while, Teo, that whoever does come out of Division 1 next year, they could arguably go into Division 2 next year as an automatic favourite. Obviously, it depends a lot on what happens over summer for all the clubs that will be taking part in Division 2 next year. And I think at the time we sort of said it might depend on whether East Keilor is there next year or not. And there's a very good chance that East Keilor might get promoted. So it's obviously going to affect their 18s, I reckon. We know they've got really, really good 18s, Hadfield, and there's plenty of good players there. Obviously, I saw Michael Tang playing the VFL tail on the weekend for Coburg, and he did a couple of nice things. So it's going to have an effect there, because they might have to rely on a lot of those guys to come up in Division 2, in Senior Division 2 next year, and those boys might be able to have an impact against, obviously, some of the expansion clubs and a couple others that might be struggling. So I reckon they'll obviously be okay next year, Hadfield. We don't really know, because it's the first time since we've had the split that a Division 1 club has gone down into Division 2, so we don't really have that comparison like we did with, say, Hillside going up and how they compared against Division 1 this year. So I suppose that's we're going to find out next year just how the first club from Division 1 going to Div 2 does handle that drop. But I reckon they'll be okay. They should be fairly confident that if they can keep, obviously they might lose 5 or 6, but if they can keep a lot of these guys there and obviously top up with a lot of the kids that they might have already have that's obviously pushing for senior football now, then they should be more than competitive and they should be expecting to make finals. So that's the plus side for Hadfield. They can really aim for a winning season now. It's really, really hard to play Division 1 football consistently, and you've got so many clubs that are on an even keel, basically, and so that for that reason, I do think Hadfield can feel good. Obviously, probably come the new year, they know that they're going to be in an easier competition, and that should mean more wins, which obviously helps all sorts of things around the club, and obviously boosts the morale as well. So. That's always a lighter side of relegation. Obviously, it's not going to feel too good right now, but come February next year, Teo, when they're preparing to embark on their 2015 campaign, they should be feeling pretty bullish about their chances.
Now, just a word on Oak Park as the full stop on their season. They actually kicked more points, as in a higher points for, than 2 of the finalists this season. And as I mentioned before, they had a percentage of over 100. They lost 7 games by 20 points or less. I mean, bearing in mind that Ben Chapman, the Oak Park coach, is joining the commentary team for special comments on Sunday. I can't tip the bucket on the club here, and I don't intend to, but I would only give them maybe a 3 or a 4 out of 10 for the season that they've had, because I think that they really should be starting next year as aspirants to win the premiership, and at a very minimum, they will want to be making the top 4. How do you see it?
I'll give them a 5 or 6 because I reckon they're coming from a very, very long way back, and they've had some pretty good performances this year, Teo. So I reckon they just about broke even for their year. Obviously, first year back in Division 1, they now know what they're getting into as they prepare for this pre-season. Obviously, going into last year's pre-season, it was a bit of the unknown exactly what they probably needed to make sure they were going to be competitive, and I'm sure Benny Chapman and whoever's in charge of recruiting down there at Oak Park, they're going to have a much better idea of exactly where they need to top up to make sure they're competing against your Taylors Lakes, your Westmeadows, your Tullars and your West Coburgs. Yeah, I think they're obviously going to be okay as well next year. Oak Park, they should be able to improve on what they did this year.
Now, let's look at some of the other teams whose season came to a close at the weekend. Glenroy, 13-3-81, losing to Tullamarine in what was essentially a dead rubber. Tullamarine, 13-10-88. Glenroy took it up to West Coburg for a half last week and then dropped off significantly after half-time. In this game, they more or less stayed with Tullamarine for the full day, but their season comes to a close. They're another team that will be aspiring to the top 4 next year. I'm not sure if they're an absolute premiership contender. Interesting to note that Joel Coombs, one of their big off-season recruits and one of their few off-season recruits, actually played in the reserves, and Glenroy's reserves are in the top 4, and kicked 9 goals at the weekend, so perhaps a readjustment of some of the priorities down at Glenroy. And well, next season can't come quickly enough because this year has been a bit of a campaign of struggle. 7-9, just 84%, and their attack was the 7th best in the league. They were outscored by both Oak Park and Hillside in the points for column.
I don't want to be too critical of Glenroy, Taylor, but I'm pretty sure that Q was in the rack. Maybe halfway through the year, they knew they weren't going to be able to compete with Tullamarine and West Coburg when the whips were cracking, and even though they pushed Tulla this weekend, you know, the question's got to be asked exactly what Ash Manning was hoping to get out of this game, obviously, with the obviously big final coming up this weekend. Yeah, I reckon Glenroy, they don't know exactly what they need to do this summer, Taylor. I didn't see much of them this year live, but yeah, just again maybe topping up, getting a bit more depth into the side. That might be what they're looking for. Some high quality players to be able to come through when others go down. So that might be what they look at next year to get back into the top 4.
We'll wait and see how the off-season shapes up for them because, as we have suggested on this podcast all season, they were more or less happy to retain last year's team, and the rest of the league either started making up ground or, in the case of 4 clubs, overtook them. Let's talk about Tullamarine as part of the tips at the end of the segment and move on instead to Taylors Lakes defeating Craigieburn 8-16-64 to Craigieburn 8-11-59. We spoke to Peter Bugden, the Craigieburn coach, after the match and quizzed him both about the game itself and also the Great Escape, staying up and avoiding relegation. You can hear that interview on the EDFL YouTube channel. Just click back through to the channel homepage. Craigieburn, apparently there was a late incident where they thought they were lining up for goal 15 metres out directly in front, but the umpires conferred and agreed that the siren had in fact sounded before the infringement that would have been the free kick took place. So they missed out on the chance to win the game, but they would have known by about half-time. They were scores level. Hadfield were getting absolutely pantsed, and percentage-wise they were going to survive in the division. So they stay up. It is the Great Escape. And after spending most of the season in the hot seat, they jump out in the last 2 weeks. What do you make of Craigieburn's campaign?
Yeah, congratulations on staying up. And even though Peter Bugden didn't tell us in the post-game show on the radio that they're not into celebrating wins, I was certainly very relieved and very pleased with the fact that they won't be going down to Division 2, especially considering the fact that not so long ago, Teo, they were a premier side. And to push Taylor's Lakes as well. Again, the question's got to be asked exactly just how hard Taylor's Lakes were going at this game, but the fact they stayed with the club that has knocked off Tullamarine and West Coburg within the last month, it's really shows that Craigieburn really had a good game, and obviously they had the chance to win it right at the end there and just a bit stiff with the call. So well done to Craigieburn. Again, though, what is it they have to do to start coming up again and becoming a finalist? Because it's been quite a few lean years now, both in Premier and now in Division 1. They were spent most of the last 2 years perched on the bottom of the ladder. On both occasions they get away with not being relegated. So, we keep talking.
Well, I do have a theory on Craigieburn. Looking at their off-season this last year, it was all about bringing back former Craigieburn juniors who might have gone to other clubs, both in Premier or Division 1. And I just get the feeling that this coming season, if they can retain that core of homegrowns, then they might be able to go out and target some recruits from either Premier or outside the league. Peter Bugden has a lot of Northern League connections and experience, as we know. So I actually think they went down the right path of trying to get as many Craigieburn people back to the club as possible, and now perhaps they can be a little bit more expansive. And look, I don't think that the club is going to have anything short of an ambition to make the top 4 next year. And while they might seem a fair way away from that now, I actually think that's probably where a club of their size and stature should be aiming to be next season.
Yeah, certainly. If they can find a way to make coming to Craigieburn perhaps more attractive for good quality players to come along, maybe that's going to be their focus issue. They've really got to sell the club now, and hopefully that can result in some pretty good players coming over, because they really can't make finals based on what they've got at the moment, the Eagles, and that's going to be the big point for them over the summer, to try and actually sell the club to some players to be able to perhaps sway them to come over.
And the other team whose season came to an end, Hillside, 5-10-40, comfortably beaten by West Coburg, 17-10-112. This game was never under any sort of illusion that Hillside were going to be a chance of winning. It was 32-5 at quarter time and 9-2 at the half, and it was actually 70 points the difference by three-quarter time, and Hillside rallied 3 goals each in the final quarter. We spoke extensively about Hillside last week. The word on the street is that Steve Kolenyuk won't be back as coach. I think anyone who watched that post-match interview with him on the EDFL YouTube channel from last week's radio broadcast would have perhaps felt the same, that the writing was on the wall and that Hillside are heading in a new direction. But I guess just a final word on their season, I would give Hillside maybe a 7, maybe even an 8 out of 10 for the year that they've had to come up from Division 2, get the club stabilised as far as off-field committee, finances, player contentment, and now they can look at loading up and again putting aspirations for the top 4 on the table, whether it's Kolenyuk returning or whether it's a new coach that guides the team next season.
Yeah, well, they certainly get a pass, because that was basically their only goal this year, Teo, was to survive, and they have done that. And now they can start looking to becoming a finals contender again. So well done to Hillside. They've stayed up, and that's exactly what they were hoping to get out of 2014. Good to see my man again, Fabio Delizia, after getting the Sporting Globe Player of the Day prize last week, best on ground again for the Sharks this week, and kicked a goal as well in what was a pretty low score in the end for Hillside. So well done to him. But as far as West Coburg are concerned, they're just flying after getting knocked off by Taylor's Lakes a couple of weeks ago. They go into this Tulla game on the weekend, obviously in pretty good form, and best on ground, Alex Stewart kicked 5 in the end in the win. So they're obviously looking pretty strong now, to Burgers.
And we've held off on talking about the top 4 bound teams from the matches just gone this weekend, because it's all about the finals that are coming up on Saturday and Sunday. Both of them at Windy Hill this week, so they'll get that experience. And of course, 2 of them will be lining up in the grand final in a couple of weeks' time. Saturday's game is West Coburg against Tullamarine. We've seen the 2 previous instalments, Adam, and it feels like we're both well educated on what to expect. I think it will be another game with a defence-first mentality, but I do hope that the game can break open and perhaps a high-scoring shootout with all the attacking weapons in both these teams might start happening, because the quality in both of these teams is immense, And unfortunately, in the two head-to-head games this season, it really has been more about a arm wrestle, trench warfare style of football.
Yeah, it's going to be a fairly different game to the two that we saw on Match of the Day previously, Teo. As you mentioned, it's going to be a nice day, and it's obviously Windsor Hill, so we can expect, obviously, a ground that's going to be in pretty good condition, and that is why I reckon Tullamarine wins this game, Teo. They've been allowed to play the sort of game that's, the sort of game style that they would have liked to against West Coburg in their first two outings. This is going to be a very, very different game to what we've seen, just like I said. And that's going to favour Tullamarine. The wider ground, they've got a lot of runners. I know West Coburg's got a lot of quality players that can run the ball as well, but Tulla can really move the ball quite well and are really efficient in that respect. So they're gonna turn up. They pushed West Coburg pretty close the first time around and just got outclassed on a ground that really didn't suit them the second time around at Shore Reserve. At Shore Reserve. So. Windsor Hill on a nice day. That's exactly what Ash Manning would have been hoping for the first week of the finals against West Coburg, and I know they're going to be pretty confident down there at Tulla this weekend, and I reckon they win, Taylor.
Well, no, I totally disagree with you. I think that if the game does break open, I think that West Coburg just have a few more players that are capable of running in the open spaces and breaking the lines. Satanta Makota, Abdi Fidax, both of those two some of the fastest, but also good kicks in the league. Meki Lilino, we know, can move the ball and break the lines. And also, the other player I'm looking for here who was really good in the game at Shore Reserve was Syed Elmi. Liked a lot of what he did in the forward 50 as one of the smaller players, but he's also got a bit of ability to move up the ground and perhaps play for half forward or a wing. So if it is a lockdown game and it never breaks open, and it's just, as we've seen on occasions at Windy Hill, the ball just going from stoppage to stoppage up and down the Bowls Club side, and some games do descend into that. It seems to be the side of the ground that teams play down when it is blustery. Then maybe West Coburg might have the bigger bodies and might be able to win in a grind, and we've seen them do it twice already this season. But I think if the game does break open and becomes a bit of a shootout, I'll be backing West Coburg to win. So it's nice to be completely different on one of these tips, and we'll see which style gets employed and who gets up at the weekend on Saturday.
Taylor, I do know where you're coming from. Individually, West Coburg does have a lot of talent, and on paper they probably are better, but as a team unit, I really trust Tullamarine to be able to get the job done and put together 4 quarters of football that is going to be able to knock off West Coburg. I really trust what Ash Manning might be brewing down there. I don't know what it is, obviously, that he's hoping to bring to the table at Windsor Hill on Saturday, but as a team unit, I reckon that's why Tulla has West Coburg covered. They're just going to be able to play the game out better. Simple as that.
Let's go to the radio game on Sunday. It will be a 2 p.m. start on Northwest FM, running until 5 p.m, so a bit shorter than our regular Saturday time slot, but no less important. The elimination final, Taylors Lakes versus Westmeadows. These two have split their head-to-head meetings 1-1 this season, and even though Taylors Lakes have been able to beat both West Coburg and Tullamarine in the back half of the year, and Westmeadows have been sadly off the pace against those two teams, head-to-head, this is actually a pretty close matchup. And speaking about low-scoring and grinding games, these two have actually played a couple of the uglier, more forgettable matches of the season. 76-69, Taylors Lakes got up in round 1, and 53-59 they lost in round 21. So I think Taylors Lakes start as a fairly warm favourite here, Adam, but can you make a case for Westmeadows to basically make it best out of 3 and get the win for the second time over Taylors Lakes this season?
They're going to be hungry to Lakers this weekend, Teo. You go back a month, maybe 6 weeks ago, and a lot of people were convinced that they were a fairly distant third to Tullamarine and West Coburg. But after beating those two sides in recent weeks, all of a sudden they're going to be thinking, you know what, we're a really, really good show to perhaps take out this flag. And for that reason, they might just dish out some punishment on Westmeadows, who have been quite disappointing in recent weeks. So I'm expecting Taylors Lakes to win this one fairly comfortably. Obviously, I'm hoping it's close for the sake, obviously, of the broadcast and the league and the spectacle for the people that rock up. But Westmeadows will have to turn around what's been a pretty poor recent stretch to be able to knock off Taylor's Lakes, who right now are hot.
What about the premiership hopes of Taylor's Lakes if they get through? How much can we read into them beating West, Coburg and Tullamarine back-to-back? I've been quite enthusiastic about them. You've been a bit less convinced and a bit tougher to win over. Do you think if they get through here that there is a prospect that they could get through to the grand final, or would you still be backing whoever loses out of the Tullamarine and West Coburg game to be getting that fourth head-to-head and yet another rematch against their fellow top two rival in the decider?
The quality that Taylor's Lakes has on its playing list, it probably doesn't in the end stack up to Tullamarine and West Coburg, and for that reason, if they're gonna do it again and knock off these two sides back-to-back weeks on their way to Premiership glory, then they're going to be playing a lot of spirit. And the downside of that is it's quite energy sapping, so it's going to be a really, really long campaign for Taylor's Lakes, and I still have them at very long odds to be able to get that job done. So. Good luck to them. I hope that they can really push these clubs all the way. Obviously, whoever they get, provided they beat Westmeadows, is going to be in for a very, very tough show. But they're just probably not enough there, and they're going to have to expend a lot of energy to be able to knock off those two sides back to back.
That's it for Essendon Forward Division 1 discussion. Don't forget, Sunday afternoon, Oak Park coach Ben Chapman and former EDFL coach with the Northern Saints, player with Greenvale Premiership winner and award-winning special commentator, AFL Victoria Media Awards winner 2012, Matt O'Connor, will be back on the broadcast on Sunday afternoon, 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. on Northwest FM 98.9 and streaming on the web at northwestfm.org, and you can also get it in your pocket on Team App. Just go to the App Store or Google Play if you've got an Android phone, search for Team App, and then in Team App, search for EDFL. The live radio button is the easiest way to listen to the Northwest FM broadcast if you are out of range for 98.9 FM. You're listening to the EDFL Web TV podcast, brought to you by the Sporting Globe, 690 Mount Alexander Road in Moonee Ponds. And now we move on to Division 2, where, again, we said goodbye to 4 clubs. Their season came to an end, and 4 more advance on to the final series. Let's start, Adam, with the teams that have fallen by the wayside. A brief word on East Sunbury, 6-3-39 to East Keilor 13-14-92. This was a lot closer than I expected. I thought that East Keilor might keep the foot on the accelerator and really go on with the job. In the end, it was a fairly comfortable arm's-length win for East Keilor, never at any risk of being upset or even losing a quarter for that matter. But what did you make of East Sunbury signing off on their season? 1 win, but 41.8%, which is a significant improvement on last year.
Yeah, it's obviously a slow build for Thunder down there. And, year 3, what are they going to want to get out of that year, Teo? The fact you can't get relegated out of Division 2, it means that... the incentive isn't necessarily there to really desperately start winning more games. But, as far as morale's concerned and even just, I suppose, the look of it all, I mean, you want to start winning some more games next year, and they've got to keep improving. But, as we know in Division 2, it's all about how much you improve compared to the other sides next year. So a couple of clubs come back to the pack in 2015, and maybe that's their chance to score 3 or 4 wins. And you look at Jacana, obviously, they were in a pretty similar situation a couple of years ago. So they'll look at that and think, we can do it. Jacana were pushing for finals this year. So it is possible, for East Sunbury. But, obviously they've got a bit of work to do, because you don't want to be, having winless and 1-win seasons for much longer, because it's really not a good look.
Burnside Heights, in the end, Coburg Districts, I should correct myself there, really got a hold of them, 30-2200 to 7-10-52. At halftime, it was 57-34, and we were all thinking, all right, well, Burnside Heights, battling along in this game. Might have an honourable defeat to end the year. And in the final quarter, it was 13 goals to 1. So things really got out of hand. Finals-bound Coburg Districts bringing the pain in the end. Burnside Heights finishes the year with 32.84%. They got the 2 wins and they won their little mini-series against East Sunbury, so they avoid the wooden spoon in their first year. And I guess we've spoken about it throughout the course of the year. Burnside Heights used a stack of senior players over the course of the campaign. And next season they'll maybe be trying to work their way towards a more defined best 22 from the start of the season and be able to try and challenge some of the established clubs. Just how fluid was their squad during the year? Well, they had only 3 players play all 18 games for the year. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They had 10 players play 15 games, and then the rest of the list played 12 or less. So there was a huge number of players that were in the seniors for 8 games, 7 games, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So they saw a lot of what's out there, and I suppose next season, their second year as a senior club, they'll have a bit of a better idea of what they'll be trying to achieve.
Yeah, pretty good first start to avoid the wooden spoon. Burnside Heights, they got 2 of the 3 wins this year against the Thunder, so well done to the Bears in that respect. Obviously, I would have learned a lot from playing senior footy this year. It's obviously a really fast-growing club in the region, in the northwest region. That's sort of far western corner for the EDFL, and they're going to go a long way, this footy club, in the future. And they had to take this first step, and they took it pretty well. It was obviously a brave move by Justin Pegram and the admin down there at Burnside Heights to make this move so early in the club's history, only a couple of years in after being a junior club for only a couple of years. So they've done really well there, and much like East Sunbury now, it's all about trying to get some more wins, becoming more competitive, and sooner rather than later becoming a finals contender.
All right, the other teams that were eliminated from the finals race at the weekend, Jacana not able to get close to Keilor Park in the end, just held at arm's length throughout the course of the day. 13 points at halftime, then it ballooned out to 51 at three-quarter time, and even though Jacana kicked 6 goals to 3 in the final quarter, they weren't able to get back in with a realistic shot of winning the game. So Keilor Park off to the finals, but Jacana's campaign comes to an end. 8 wins, 10 losses, 89%. I tipped him for the top 4 on a hunch more than anything at the start of the season, and it very nearly came off. Jacana really reaping the benefits, and we've spoken so many times about how good it is for Division 2 that a team that was winless and only won a handful of games over a number of seasons through the late 2000s is now able to have a season where they go 8-10.
Yeah, they get a tip for the year. Jacana next year is going to be all about making sure they do play finals, but it was a pretty disappointing end to the season for them. I know they were hit pretty hard by unavailability and and that sort of thing as well. But look, they ran into a team that's pretty hot in the moment in Keilor Park, and the Devils were able to reverse the previous result from mid-year, where Jacana almost made Keilor Park look silly. So right on to the Devils, but as far as the Jags are concerned, getting a few wins this year was great. Now it's all about what do they need to do to become a finals contender.
And the other team out, Moonee Valley, also ending up with an 8-10 record, 128% in the end. They had a good percentage all season, really, but ultimately unable to win when it mattered in the last round. There was a crucial goal kicked in this match, Roxburgh Park winning in the end by 24 points. On the three-quarter time siren, it actually got the margin out to 26. Had Moonee Valley gone in a little bit closer than that, they might have been able to give it a shake in the last quarter, but Roxy then came out and kicked the first goal of the last, and it left Moonee Valley a fair way behind. And in the end, their season comes to a close with a lot of losses that they would have hoped on a better day to be able to get over the line. And I guess a percentage of 128 reflects that they cashed in when the going was good, but ultimately they lost too many close games.
Yeah, disappointing after playing in a grand final last year. Moonee Valley, I know they lost a lot of top-end players to higher divisions and whatnot over the summer, but they still would have expected to play finals this year, and they really had an opportunity to get a job done over a depleted Roxburgh Park outfit, and they weren't able to. So bad luck for Moonee Valley, and next year they not only should be playing finals, but they should be contending for a premiership, I reckon, if they can retain a lot of the talent that they've got and bring a couple guys in as well, perhaps.
Well, their under-18s, of course, made the finals, so we know that they've got a pretty good production line there at Moonee Valley, and we'll wait to see what sort of recruiting strategy they go with during the off-season. So we look now to the first weekend of finals, and we've got the qualifying final. Part 3, Roxburgh Park versus East Keilor. First time around, it was a classic, one of the best matches of the season. Second time around, a bit more of an arm wrestle, and East Keilor got the points, and they've arguably been the premiership favourite ever since, but Roxburgh Park will be hoping that they can, again, put one over East Keilor and go direct to the grand final. Adam, it's a tough tip. Who do you like and why?
Oh, yeah, it's really tough because Roxy, without Mickelson and Blacker in the side, still able to win, by a sizable enough margin to show that they were a better outfit than Moonee Valley on the weekend. And for that reason, it does make the tip pretty hard because East Keilor should still really be the best team in the division. But Roxy are going to take them all the way, I reckon, this weekend. East Keilor still wins, but it's going to be a really, really close game, and Roxy are going to be more than competitive, obviously. I wouldn't be surprised either way. It really is a flip of the coin. I reckon it'll land on East Keilor's side.
Yeah, I was looking at the profile of the two teams. I think East Keilor has the advantage as far as getting first hands on the ball, but I also think that it is going to be, when the ball gets outside, a better option here for Roxburgh Park to use their run and carry at Coburg City Oval. Very wide ground, a ground where admittedly you can get lost on the wings. But, what do you reckon, Adam? How are you feeling about Roxburgh Park's chances if they can use that pace and use the ball well to their advantage? I'm tipping them for that reason.
Yeah, well, sort of experience over youth. Obviously, East Keilor have a lot of players with finals experience. They played a couple of finals last year, won a flag the year before that. So they're coming up against kids that haven't necessarily probably not played any senior finals in their senior football lives. So and again, that really puts East Keilor at an advantage because the pressure is going to be on there. But yeah, Roxy, they're an exuberant sort of group, Teo, and I do sort of concur with what you're saying there because they're just going to go out there and I suppose play their natural games and really take it up to East Keilor and show some of that exuberance, I reckon.
And the elimination final, Keilor Park have had to battle right down to the final round of the season to make it in. Coburg Districts pretty much knew that they were going to be playing this game for the best part of 8 weeks. Is Keilor Park the form team coming into this one, or do you think that Coburg Districts will be able to get them here? Bearing in mind that they've already played 3 times this season, and Keilor Park has actually beaten Coburg Districts in the last 2 head-to-heads, which makes this one a very interesting match.
Yeah, Keilor Park's definitely got better form at the moment, but Coburg Districts, they've probably almost been in cruise control for a little while. They've known for quite a long time that they're going to be in this elimination final, and as we know, Teo, all finals are at a neutral venue, so it didn't really matter if they dropped down to 4th place, Coburg Districts, and maybe that's why the foot's been off the pedal for a couple of weeks. But you don't want to flirt with form too much. I doubt that Chris Tankard allowed that to happen deliberately. He might have left some players out here or there, and some other blokes might not have been up. But I hope they're up this week, Teo, because I know Keilor Park will be up. This is a club that is desperate to be competitive and be winning finals. They got knocked out last year by East Keilor in the finals at the exact same ground. And no, it was at Saw Reserve. In fact, they played at Coburg last year. This game's obviously at Glenroy this weekend. But yeah, they want to make amends for that Keilor Park, and for that reason, it's going to be a really, really close, tight affair. I just think Coburg Districts will just get them on a really tight one.
Adam, thanks so much for joining me on the Skype today for the EDFL Web TV podcast, of course brought to you by the Sporting Globe at Moonee Ponds. I'm looking forward to getting back to the Globe next week and looking ahead to preliminary final weekend in Essendon for Division 1, Division 2, and also the first week of finals in Strathmore Community Bank Premier Division. Just your final thought before the weekend on what to expect.
One of the games of the year at Nipper Jordan Oval on the radio, Tay. So tune in, 98.9 Northwest FM, team app, all the ways you can get the broadcast. Make sure you're listening to that. And obviously Sunday as well. So first weekend we've had the 2 broadcasts, really looking forward to that.
Thank you everyone for listening. Make sure you check out the EDFL YouTube channel and all the social media networks as well. Facebook, Essendon DFL, also EDFL Footy on Twitter and also on Instagram. Adam, thanks for joining me. I'll see you next week.